Welcome to week 7 of Self-Esteem Remodel. So, in week 5, we talked about the relationship that you have with your emotions and learning to honor all of your emotional experiences. And in week 6, we talked about values, identifying your values in order to make sure your choices are in alignment with your values. So in week 7, you're going to see how we build off of those two pieces as we talk about the next structural component, which is having and holding healthy boundaries. All right. So early on in the relationship with my husband, we were sitting at breakfast at one point having a conversation. I honestly can't remember what it was we were talking about. At one point, I shared something with him that was significant to me, emotional. It may have been about a medical procedure that was coming up. I really don't remember the specifics. What I do remember is I shared this with him and I got zero response. After I finished talking, he immediately started talking about a completely different topic. I was so hurt. I felt ignored. I felt unseen. What I had to say didn't matter, wasn't important. And I was really upset, and he could see that I was upset. And so then we moved into the silence game where I stewed and I thought, oh my goodness, how insensitive and how come he doesn't care about and all of the stuff that runs through your head. And he's silent in confusion, upset, clearly can see that I'm upset, but doesn't understand what happened. So we finish breakfast, we make the drive home. I'm talking myself through, okay, you gotta communicate, you gotta tell him what's going on. And once we get home, I'm able to say, okay, here's the deal. When I share something of significance, when I share something emotional, my expectation is that you acknowledge that you've heard what I've said. And so that was an example of setting a healthy boundary. And we'll talk more about this example as we move on. But there are components of setting healthy boundaries that are really critical to be aware of. So first, let's talk about why are boundaries necessary? Why are they so important? So boundaries teach other people how to treat us. They teach other people how to treat us when we have boundaries and when we don't have boundaries. You are communicating to other people how to treat you. Boundaries are what creates safety in your relationships. This is so critical. Boundaries create the safety. It's easy to see this when you think about your own children and boundaries that you'd set for them as they were growing up was all about trying to keep them safe. So the same thing is true as we're now considering boundaries that you have with yourself and boundaries that you have in your relationships. Boundaries are necessary for creating a healthy self-esteem and healthy relationships. So this is really important to spend time on considering and looking at how are you doing when it comes to having and holding healthy boundaries. Okay, so first let's talk about what a boundary is versus a request. So a boundary is a must-have, have to have it. And a request is a nice to have. When a boundary is crossed, you experience feeling unsafe. And so that might be unsafe emotionally, unsafe physically or sexually. Could be unsafe emotionally or financially. In some way, you experience feeling unsafe when a boundary has been crossed. When a request is forgotten or dismissed, you experience disappointment. So that's important to remember, is think about what did I experience when this happened? And was it a disappointment? I wish that would have happened. Or was it that feels unsafe? I'm not okay with that. And that can give you some clarity around what is a boundary versus what is a request. I'd really like to have this, but it is not necessary for me to feel safe with myself or in my relationships. Okay, healthy boundaries are value-based. Good news is you know 5 of your most important values. Values or boundaries focus on your behavior, not the other person's behavior. As we've talked about, you cannot control other people. They have agency just like you have agency. So in creating healthy boundaries, you have to be focused on your behavior, your agency. Healthy boundaries are you're focused on the desired outcome. So often when we talk about what we'd like in relationships, we actually end up talking about what we don't want in relationships. It's healthier and more likely to have a positive outcome when we focus on what we do want. So boundaries are focused on the desired outcome. Boundaries are love-based. So it can be love for yourself, love for others, but they are loved-based. And healthy boundaries are communicated directly. Healthy boundaries are held because you value and respect yourself. So that's the cyclical piece that happens. When I hold boundaries, I respect and value myself more, and therefore I'm more likely to hold boundaries, hold my healthy boundaries. Okay, healthy boundaries are not. It is not about controlling someone else's behavior. You need to be really aware of this. If you're finding yourself in relationships trying to control other people's behavior for any variety of reasons, that is not a healthy boundary. And healthy boundaries are not fear-based. So the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. So if your boundaries are not focused on love, they are likely focused on fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being alone, fear of being criticized. So pay attention to what's motivating your desire to set a boundary. That will give you some really important information about if it's a healthy boundary or not. Okay, so here's your exercise for this portion of week 7. What boundaries do you need to feel safe? Safe with yourself and safe with others. So let me pause for a second and talk about this. So we do have boundaries with ourselves. So we build trust with ourselves. So what is it that we need in order to feel safe, at peace, solid within ourselves and who we are? And so those boundaries could include things around honesty with money, or those things could include I will treat myself the way I speak to myself will be respectful. So those kinds of boundaries we have with ourselves. So boundaries with ourselves and others. What is it that you need in order to feel safe in your relationships? Consider recent experiences or experiences that stand out to you where you haven't felt safe. This can be a helpful way to sort of recognize what you want to shift. So think about those experiences where you haven't felt safe and consider what would be a healthy boundary I would put into place that would work towards the desired outcome, not just the avoidance of the undesired outcome, but what's the boundary that would help create the desired outcome? Write out at least 5 relationship boundaries that demonstrate your value and worth. Because remember, that's what boundaries are about. They teach others and communicate to ourselves how much we value, care, and respect ourselves. Okay, so this is the exercise for the first portion of week 7.